Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Judy and I love travel, history, and finding out about how people live. If someone else is doing your trip planning for you and you only have limited time, you have to cram it all into a single outing. I've found, particularly after my first visit, that it works out better for me to break my city visits into manageable chunks, often spread out over several days. My short take will introduce you to a short stroll or a single site, like a cathedral or a square, or an area so you can get a feel for the flavor of the space and decide whether you'd like to see it for yourself. So strap on your walking shoes and let's go see something new today on The Armchair Traveler. I set off fairly early on Sunday morning with one major goal in mind, to make the uphill climb from the Arno River to the Piazza Michelangelo, which my guidebook informed me was a really nifty place to get a great photo of the city. Walk to a well-marked viewing point, a couple of quick pics, and I would be done. Back to the hotel to goof off for the rest of the morning. Things don't always go the way you plan. As you can see, the route was clearly marked. I had never heard of San Miniano al Monte. Florence is chock full of monuments to people I've never heard about. That's the entire point of these memorials, so people will remember them. This one is dedicated to Count Nikolai Nikitich Demidov. He was a Russian industrialist, collector, military commander, and arts patron. He was a diplomat who served in Paris and at first actually admired Napoleon. However, rising Franco-Russian tensions forced his recall. He and his wife moved back to Russia via Italy, arriving home in 1812. He fought with distinction in the Russo-Turkish War, and at the start of the French invasion of Russia, having wised up about Napoleon, actually financed the its officers, which he then commanded against Napoleon's forces fighting at Oravais and Borodino. The ambassador bounced around quite a bit, leaving memories, money, various art and scientific collections, and good works in his wake. For a while, he was even the Russian ambassador here in Tuscany. While he was in Florence, he built a home for elderly and orphans and donated special capital for its maintenance. The grateful citizens of Florence renamed a square in his honor and had a monument built here. This is the Porta San Miniato, there's that name again, part of the city walls and a gateway up a hill. The right edge of the left-hand photo shows you the remains of the gateway. 3 minutes later, my camera includes timestamps, I found the steps. I do remember watching this young man run happily up those steps, and I also remembered waving to him as he passed me by. This 19th century park sits about 2/3 up the highest hill in this part of Florence and has drop-dead views of the cathedral as well as the rest of the town. It really ought to be a much more developed area than it is. There are a couple of bars nearby, one somewhat overpriced tablecloth restaurant just above the piazza, and some very welcome park benches. There are a lot of temporary vendors here, one-day operations under canvas that apparently set up and knock down each day. Mostly this is just a bus stop and a car park, however. People come up here for the view, and I must say it really is worth the effort. This is the $1 million view, and I think it was worth the climb. From left to right, the smaller brick dome is part of the Basilica of San Lorenzo. The much smaller white dome building that appears next to it is actually the very large baptistry of the cathedral. The tall white tower is called Giotto's Bell Tower, which is partially obscured by the bell tower of the Church of Margherita, and to the far right is the enormous dome of the cathedral itself. The Abbey of San Miniato sits just a little further up the hill, further being defined as distance, not in the amount of climb or the number of steps. I marked out some of those steps for you with orange arrows on this Landsat image from Google Earth. I didn't realize it at the time because I couldn't see it, but the Abbey is actually located in the center of a star-shaped fort. The whole complex is surrounded by defensive walls, obvious in this photo, complete with bastions. Those are those pointed things marked in green, and originally hastily built by Michelangelo during the siege of 1553. Michelangelo was governor general and in charge of the city's fortification during the siege of His ideas about fortification were every bit as innovative as his ideas about pretty much everything else, and he actually left behind drawings with planned additions to Florence's wall, although the fort was completed long after his time. San Miniato al Monte sits on the highest point above the city, with a commanding view downhill toward the Arno River, and one which Michelangelo recognized as having enormous possible strategic importance. Minius was an Armenian and apparently an officer in the Roman Empire, stationed here. He became a Christian, moved up on the hill as a hermit, was rousted out, dragged down to the city center, tried, convicted, and executed. The beheading was part of an anti-Christian beheading spree in around 250 AD and was approved by the Roman Emperor Decius. I note that the next year Decius died, apparently shot by an arrow in a battle far from here. The story goes on, somewhat horrifyingly, that immediately following his beheading, Minius picked up his head, walked back across the river to this mountaintop, and set up as a hermit. He existed here for the next few centuries as a kind of undead monster, frightening passers-by with unpleasant gurgling noises. I never have found out what the gurgling noises might have been. A sanctuary was erected here in his honor once he finally and mercifully went silent. About halfway back to sea level, and adjacent to the Michelangelo Piazza, which had already given me what I wanted, I diverted into a rose garden. It has a collection of about 350 varieties and also has views, statues, and a Japanese garden, a gift from Florence's sister city of Kyoto. Because it was mid-April, the roses weren't much in evidence, but I did find this fine citrus tree. I also found comfortable benches, a water fountain, and a bathroom. Thank you for joining me on this inaugural short take, which took longer, climbed higher, and gave me not just a spectacular view, but quite a bit of history. Come back next time for another adventure here on The Armchair Traveler.